So, in this third part of the examination of looking at Tomasino's treatment of Persian impact on Judaism during the Second Temple Jewish period, well, now take a look here at the concepts of life after death in the Old Testament and in Second Temple Judaism. So, in the Old Testament, there really is no positive afterlife for anyone. No one really kind of what oftentimes people think of today as going to heaven after dying to live eternally. You do have the ideas of Enoch, who walks with God in Genesis, and that has raised a lot of speculation. What does this kind of walk with God means when everybody else has been told how many years that they lived and then died? So walks with God has certainly um, opened people up to the idea that it is some kind of euphemism for being translated into heaven rather than experiencing death. Of course, others might argue, well, this is just a different way of talking about Enoch's death, to walk with God. In other words, he does die, but this is a way of talking about being with God or going to God in some sense. But it doesn't look like Enoch is um, kind of the model for what happens to most people in the Old Testament. Um, so it doesn't say that he explicitly dies. And Elijah is translated before dying, so he doesn't have any death. So the only two people who in the Old Testament who are referenced as continuing on to live are Enoch and Elijah. There were probably beliefs about dead people's spirits existing, but so you see something like the Witch of Endor who conjures up um, Samuel before Saul, and you seem to have some kind of indications of possible um, recognition of dead people's spirits at other times, but it's never a desirable state. It's never what anybody wants to happen. They don't want to die, become this disembodied spirit. Language alluding to resurrection is found in books like Ezekiel and Daniel. Now, you see, I do have contra Thomasino. I say alluding to a resurrection, but it's primarily focused on national revival. The concept of a personal bodily resurrection, I'm not even really quite sure is there in Daniel. I think the language of resurrection is still kind of have this national sense. But I do recognize that Daniel is written at a time when the idea of personal bodily resurrection is beginning to take shape. I think it takes shape and becomes to be expressed more in light of the Maccabean uprising and the death of those who die on behalf of the law. And so First Maccabees doesn't really seem to indicate personal, individual resurrection, but Second Maccabees does. So the other thing, just kind of quickly here, noting about life after death in Second Temple Jewish literature, some literature have no evidence of a belief in a positive afterlife. So Tobit, Ben Sirach, so they're in the Apocrypha, Ecclesiastes in the biblical text, and First Maccabees. So we don't see in anything in these works talking about a positive afterlife that people will have. This will eventually become the view of the Sadducees. So the Sadducees have the kind of traditional view that once you're dead, you're dead, and you are blessed in this life by staying faithful to God's law. You're not looking for compensation or some kind of justice in the next life. This is the only life, and so you want to try and stay faithful and receive the blessings, kind of in the Deuteromistic idea. So you obey the law and you are blessed. If you disobey the law, you are cursed. Um, Jubilees, the book of Jubilees expects a positive afterlife, But of course, there's a question here whether or not Jubilees thinks it is a disembodied afterlife. If it does think that way, it does stand out as kind of unique of the trajectory that most Second Temple Jewish literature is going in. Of course, Philo is an example of Hellenized uh, Jew who may not have as much interest in a bodily afterlife, but typically most of what we're seeing becoming popular is a view of a bodily existence after death. So many authors, so like First Enoch, um, Second Maccabees, these express the view of a embodied afterlife. In other words, resurrection is becoming uh, the popular view. And this really becomes the view of the Pharisees. So they believe in a bodily resurrection, as does Jesus. And of course, anybody who's read in the Gospels where Jesus is sometimes questioned about his view of bodily resurrection by the Sadducees who doubt it. So, what we're seeing happening in the Second Temple Jews is a new view of a positive afterlife with a resurrection, and maybe with Jubilees, the possibility of something being disembodied. But that ends up becoming the more minor view of most Jews. The Sadducees' view of no positive afterlife. In other words, once you're dead, that's it. You may go to Sheol, and the existence is not really necessarily a pretty one. That again becomes kind of a more minor view. People want to think of a positive afterlife, and so the view that's held by Pharisees, early Christians, these authors like First Enoch, Second Maccabees, this becomes the more popular view. So that's a quick overview of what Tomasino covers in terms of life after death in Second Temple Judaism.